parking, and you persevered in finding this room, and so you are ahead. Mathematicians persevere in problems. I am so delighted that I think I have our entire special ed middle school team here. I am just delighted that you are here. I know that you might not all support math, but you are here now, and that just excites me to no end. We'll talk a little bit about our agenda for today. Can you forward the one in the back? You be in charge of that one. Thank you. So we're going to go through a very, very brief welcome and introductions, and I promise I am not going to make everybody say their name. Not everybody. We're going to do some reflections on year one of implementation of Desmos, and then we're going to talk about year two priorities, and then we're going to talk about what are our next steps today. So we don't expect that we will run really, really long, but there's a lot of us here, and we have a few body breaks built in because it is kind of hosting in here. So first of all, I would like to welcome people and have them stand and be recognized. So first, anybody who is new to SDW, please stand. Sorry, friends, you are the ones who are going to have to say your name. So tell us who you are and what you're teaching. Good morning, find a spot. And grab a sticker.
I'm Carson Byrne. I'm in the room over there doing math, so I'm here.
Perfect.
Kevin Zahn, 8th grade special ed.
Great.
Sarah Caraco, 6th grade special ed.
Okay. And we have some other new friends. New friend, please.
Ann Foster, I'm at Les Paul, 8th grade.
All right, welcome. And there's other math teachers that are also teaching some ELA and some science, so they might be somewhere else this morning, but we have a few new faces, not very many. We also have a few people who are not new to SEW, but are returning to SEW, so I mean you too. Can you stand? Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Ryan Green, back at Les Paul this year. I'll be doing 8th grade special ed.
Thank you. And we have some people who are not new to SEW, are employed in SEW, but are new to middle school. So I mean you too. Who are you?
Eric Conforti, 6th grade math 20.
Thank you. And that's it. That's all the people who are going to say their name. You're going to be like, okay, not me. I would also love to recognize, if you would stand, everybody who is here as a student support. So if you are special ed, if you are ESL, if you are a principal, please stand and be recognized. Okay, thank you for being here today. I would like to ask people who are here to teacher support, and by that I mean our coaches and our principals, if you would wave since you're already standing. All right, so supporting Les Paul, we have Lynn DeWalt. Supporting Butler and Horning, we have Kelly Rodriguez. And I am so impressed. I have Jeffrey, I have Ken, and I have Robbie here today. I feel really, really privileged. Thank you for being here. And of course, all of you who are veteran teachers, please stand and be recognized. We really truly are glad that you are here. Ooh, one more. Come on in. That's okay, Michelle. We're glad that you're here. All right. Super brief introduction. We are on the path to something very special. I had this slide last year for some of my PD, and it's worth repeating. We are in year 2 of a common, consistent curriculum in elementary, which means that those 6th graders are coming in with a consistent base. We are in year 2 of IXL and Desmos here at the middle school, which means that we're having consistency in the kids who are coming up to your classroom. We are in year 4 of Agile Mind, year 4 of CPM, and this is the first year that we are starting the official compacted math pathway, which means that this year we have students coming in straight from 5th grade into a compacted 6/7, and I think that that is going to be very exciting. Something of note is that we were thinking, so we did a process where we identified those 5th graders that we thought had the potential all the way back in January. And we tracked them, looked at their scores, notified families around February that this was coming. Then in May, we reviewed it, we added more kids, and we thought there's gonna be parents who are gonna request this, that are gonna say, oh, you missed my kid, we want my kid here. And it was fairly quiet. And we thought, okay, once schedules get released, then we're gonna have an onslaught of families requesting this. It was really quiet. I think we had maybe one request, maybe two, which means that how we identified them worked well. That we did a good job finding these kiddos that might have this extra potential to move faster. And not a lot of other families were saying, oh, you missed my child. So we are excited about that. We can't wait to see how that goes. And we appreciate everybody that has been a part of that. All right, Lynn is going to share with us our hopes for today.
All right, good morning, everyone. So today our content and language goal is that we will verbalize the areas of focus for year 2 and decide on one topic to further discuss with our team during planning time. And then our social goal is that we'll be open to new ideas and contribute our thoughts to promote a positive learning environment.
Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
And because this is a tight room, and because we want to model appropriate practices for our classroom when we have students sitting for quite a while, we are going to do a little movement break. And I'm going to explain it before I go into the next slide. In a moment, we are going to step out into the hallway and spread out a bit, okay? What we're going to do is that we're going to play rock, paper, scissors. And if you have seen the Avid version of rock, paper, scissors, this is going to look like this. Once we get out there and we start, you're going to turn and face anybody who is close to you, and you're going to go rock, paper, scissors, shoot. And the person who wins is going to move on and find somebody who just won too. But let's say that Chris and I are playing and she wins. I am now her #1 cheerleader, and I am going to be cheering her on as she beats the next person. Every time somebody wins, the person who is losing is added to the winning team. So by the end of the whole thing, we're going to have 2 people who are playing against each other, and the other half of us is going to be rooting for them. There's a Starbucks gift card at stake, and so you're like stretching, you're like ready for this? I love it. So let's go in the hallway where there's room. It's gonna get noisy, there's nobody else here in the basement, so I don't care. So,
Just be super careful because they were painting this wall around the corner, so no, yeah, when I walked out, so just don't lean against the wall.
all right, don't lean against the wall. Come on out and get started.
Unless you want to, of course.
I just want to be a different color. He's trying to knock me out right away.
Somehow have this going to the hallway.
I'll let Jeffrey win.
I walked out and you guys rolling along, I'm like, ooh.
Can I pick your brain at some point in my room because I have those dumb lab tables, and I think my biggest class is actually my advisory class with 25, and everybody else is like under 24. So I was thinking like 6 tables of 4, which would give. But then there's freaking tables in there.
You want to do it today?
No, because I know you have.
Yeah, it's science.
We've got science later.
Next week?
Yeah. It was just
It was
I
funny,
put
I
like
walked in
2
here
sets
today.
together to give me like a small group table and potentially give like special ed a small group table if they wanted to pull. But I kind of want your thoughts, and then I'm seeing if I can steal that whiteboard.
That is so
One for on
funny.
the roll clip for the other one. I need one. Like I need another board.
Let's go rub ourselves against the wall.
That's why I have a migraine now. Smell it.
Well, when I walked out, I'm like,
I refuse to make a science room. Okay, we're not in science.
Yeah.
And this year I had a science lab, which is great because I needed a lab last year in 7th grade, but you can't do your classroom.
Yeah.
And so I have a lab this year, but there's only one whiteboard. And I can't leave stuff up from day to day.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Take a few seconds to like, I can, yeah.
I know.
Not even in like a suit, because they
I
only
know.
have
I saw the YouTube.
You were very close. Great. Oh, because an 8 was me in 8th grade too?
All right, moving in.
Way to go, Natalie. Way to go. Way to go.
All right, we're a large room, so as we transition into one thing or another, sometimes it can be hard to not have a little bit of sight time. So we do have to get through a lot of things. So when I come back, when we try to get everybody back, let's use the quiet hand signal. And then if you see me doing this to recenter, just do that yourself, and that might remind people. Otherwise, just politely tap with a smile and say, hey, over there. So that took probably less than 3 minutes. And it got us all wrapped up, it got us excited, it got the endorphins going. Thank you for my friends in the back. Thank you for joining us. One thing that I forgot, and I apologize, is say who I am. I assumed that everybody here knows who I am, and I am wrong. So I apologize for that. My name is Leslie Wallace. This is my second year as a secondary math coordinator. Before that, I was a math coach for secondary and elementary. I coached at the high school for dual language for maybe 3 years, and elementary total for about 6 years. And before that, I was teaching. And before that, I was building secretary. And I've been in the district for about 18 years. So I kind of go way back, and I've done a lot of different things. My kids went through this district. My daughter is a senior. My son is already 1 year out of college, and always through dual language. So the language lens is really important to me, and you'll see that as we talk about some of the priorities as well. But now we're moving along, and I'm going to give it to Kelly and Lynn, and I don't think we have the music, but I wish we did.
All right, good morning again, everyone. Yeah, we want to move on to what we are going to be calling, these are a few of our favorite things. And before we start, I just want to let you know that it was about 30 years ago I began my career in this district. It was at Horning, and I was the building sub there. And having that opportunity as a young teacher was one of the best experiences that I ever had. Why? Because it allowed me to go into different classrooms that different teachers had created to learn about different routines, management styles, how they organize things, how they interacted with kids. And it was just like such an amazing, I was like a sponge and I absorbed it all. And I was able to use that, you know, as I began my career and was the following year hired in this district as a full-time teacher. Why do I tell you this story? Because here we are 30 years later, and I have the opportunity, I've been really blessed with the gift to support teachers as an instructional coach. And one of the things that that gives me is the opportunity to not only be in my classrooms of teachers at Les Paul, but it gives me the opportunity to go across district and again, to see all the amazing things that are happening in math classrooms. And as Leslie and Kelly and I were talking, and we were thinking about, we're going into year 2, we really wanted to showcase some of the things that when we went and saw them in different buildings, we were like, wow, we need everyone to see this. There's tons of great stuff going on. And we could have made this part of the presentation last the rest of the afternoon. But what we decided to do is we decided to talk about or showcase one thing from each school that as we walked out of those classrooms, we as coaches were like, we gotta make sure all of our teachers know that this is happening. So, these are a few of our favorite things. Let's sit down, we're gonna do a little coffee clutch, but I don't have my coffee. Can I take this, Jake? All right. So Kelly, I'll start. The first two things that we're gonna talk about actually came from buildings outside of West Fall. And I wanted to showcase or talk a little bit about the synthesis sheets that I saw in one of your buildings, and I don't even remember which building it was.
Butler.
Can we let the competition set?
No.
But I know when we are PLCs at Les Paul, we're working with teachers, one of the things that we talked about our first year at Desmos was, again, we got this digital platform, and even though it's digital paper, most of the time kids are working within the platform. And what are some strategies, or what are some things that we can do to make sure that kids are transferring what they're doing on the platform, so that it's not just one and done? And the synthesis sheets that were created by Butler was one of the things that I really wanted to make sure not only my staff was aware of, but that all of you were aware of. So Kelly, I'm wondering, can you tell me a little bit about kind of how this came about and how it was designed, and maybe we can hear from some of your teachers?
Oh, I would love that. So Butler teachers, feel free to interrupt, but synthesis sheets, from my understanding, really came to be as Jeffrey, the AP, at Butler, was talking about really wanting to focus on students being able to synthesize their understanding at the end of each unit. And this is not to say that other schools were not doing similar things, but this is something that really stood out as like a big piece of work at Butler this year. So Desmos actually provides some synthesis options under like that reflections and synthesis piece. So I believe we started out by kind of looking through those options. They give you like 6 to 8 options. I'm sure some of you have seen those. And we tried out a couple different things to figure out like what's going to be most useful, what's going to be most helpful for students, that isn't just them paging through their notes on an assessment, right? I think a lot of us have done those before. So this is kind of just an example. I think this was 7th grade that I pulled of what their final like end of year synthesis sheet looked like. Just as an example, I didn't have pictures of a student filled in one. But what the teachers would do during PLC then is come up, okay, what are the topics that we really focused on this unit? What could students kind of write down examples of, vocab with, and kind of move from there. Teachers, is there anything that you want to add?
What we were seeing was that they were really struggling with like, where do I even go with a blank piece of paper? They didn't know what they needed for that final test at all. And even some of them, even with the guides of like the tape diagram with the, draw a diagram, a situation, they still look at you like you have 12 heads and they have no idea what you're talking about. But at least this gave us a way to say like, okay, tape diagrams, when did we talk about those? Let's look at lesson 5, 7, and 9. Go back to those and look for some specific examples that were in your workbook. And then a lot of them, when they'd get to their test, they had done so much work on this that they'd really cemented it in their brain and they didn't even really need the synthesis page on their quiz or their test. But you could definitely tell the kids that put the effort into this were the ones that had much more grasp by the time they got to the test.
And I was like, we did kind of, 8th grade did kind of an evolution of, we started out with example problems, and then we kind of felt like we were giving a little too much, and so we ended up at a very similar stage here. I did it a little bit differently, where I would say, if I was doing tape diagrams, be like, okay, so on the back of your synthesized note sheets, this is where we're going to fill in the tape diagram so that everybody had the same message and knew where to write that. And again, the kids that did it performed much better on their assessment than the kids that didn't. Part of it was just being able to kind of let it go. I'm like, no, you don't fill it in, you don't fill it in, and that's on you. And I'm not, if you come and ask me a question, I'm gonna say, where's your note sheet? And we're gonna go, I don't have it. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you have the opportunity, so.
In the back, sir?
My team is very humble, but I remember when we first started talking about this, there were a lot of curse words and like glaring stares at me. But what I really appreciated about the Butler team with this, because this is not intuitive for kids to do, right? Like you can't just give them this and have them fill it out. When we think about focused instruction and modeling, the team here did an amazing job of actually doing the modeling, the think out loud of how they would fill this out if they were the student trying to prepare for the assessment. And then as the year went on, we saw less of the modeling because it wasn't as needed and they could just give it to the students and they knew how to do that task. So if this is something that you want to explore, know that you have to teach kids how to do it, and that modeling, that thinking aloud piece is so powerful in helping them do that. So kudos to our team here because you guys rocked it and it was awesome to see that.
And I noticed more of my maybe like advanced students who like grasp the concepts really easily were the ones that put a lot of effort in, but then I challenged them to make up their own problems for each category. Like you can look at the one in the workbook, but maybe make up your own, don't just copy and transfer kind of thing. So that could be another way to like scaffold it a little bit differently for your students.
I just have a question. Do you have any iterations for students with IEPs that perhaps had a little bit more, like did you work with special ed teachers to?
Melanie, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we had quite a few last year, so we would do, sometimes we'd be very intentional and say we want you to put this particular problem. Sometimes we would add organizers within here, or the tape diagram already drawn or stuff like that, for sure.
Yeah, like I said, I grabbed this from probably unit 7 or unit 8 of 7th
But it wouldn't be
grade.
the special ed,
Yeah,
particular
Yeah,
version.
that's the unit 8.
yeah, but some of the earlier ones had a lot more scaffolding for everybody, but yeah, they
Yeah.
would model all of that over for
And
everybody that needed it.
In my room, I did rotations with my special ed class, so I started with my highest kids and kind of just gave them a brief rundown of like, this is where I would look for each one, and then said, go away, be free. And then my middle group, I kind of gave them a little bit more guidance, and we kind of went through a little bit more together. And then my special ed, we kind of went box by box. Like, this is what I would write down, because I knew what their modified test looked like and what terms the special ed teachers had written on their test for them, so I made sure those terms were written in the boxes so that they would have that kind of go back. But, yeah, so each one was kind of custom to whoever.
I think page numbers, like within the workbook. I would say look at this page in the workbook and then find a question that looks similar to how the wording is. And that was really helpful for that population. They could look at that page and go, oh, this looks just like that, and then they would write something down.
I mean, even in general, like I gave a lesson. I was like, this box, I would look at lessons 2, 4, and 6 kind of thing. So maybe it wasn't necessarily like this problem, but it at least kind of put them in the right direction.
I would also I kept my own notes so that if a student was absent, I would post them to Google Classroom so they always had that. And then at the end of the unit, I would give Lori a copy of my highlighted notes or whatever I had for those kids that maybe didn't or weren't able to do their own, but they still had that.
I also had some special ed students that did more of like a scrapbook on here, where they would cut things out from the workbook and then glue them on here, like if they weren't able to transfer it. So I would let them like cut things out from the glossary or cut pages out from their notes and then give them like scissors and a glue stick, and they would glue things on there too.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think everybody kind of started with the scrapbook method, if I remember.
We did a one-pager first.
We did the
tried just like
one-pager
a
first.
one-pager, and that was a disaster.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
So lots of trial and error.
We gave them all the topics and we know what to do.
So knowing what you guys know now, like, is there anything you would change about this for next year, just so anybody else can hear? Like,
Scaffold first. You have to teach them how to do it first.
yeah.
A lot of modeling.
A lot of modeling.
Yeah.
And it took 90 minutes to start.
To do one, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
So as I listened to the conversation, I just,
Were those sheets like a one pager or?
Front and back. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll interrupt quick to say that sometime tonight, or maybe tomorrow, depending on how things are going in my life, you'll get the presentation and links and all the things that you might need for this. So you look at it, just probably tonight, maybe tomorrow.
Darren, I appreciate that question. Really quick, the one on the left, you can see at the bottom, well, maybe you can see at the bottom, it just says my own notes. So teachers did always leave a space for kids to add anything else that they thought was important, aside from the topics that we had chosen in our PLCs. But lots of room for writing out.
Is that like just the whole units, like pre-planned out?
So they did this for formative and summatives, and kind of discussed either in PLC or just like in the hallway what topics should be on there, but everything was pre-planned, yeah.
Where did this fit in with the tight timeline?
The pacing calendar.
Yeah, pacing calendar.
It was a synthesis day.
Synthesis day.
Yeah.
Or we did it like concurrently, like on a Friday. We just kind of either finishing up stuff from the week or, and then we would just kind of fill that in, or we'd fill it in as we go, so it wasn't, we started out like having a synthesis day and then realized that was taking way too much time. And we found that as we were filling it in as we were going, it flowed a lot better and it wasn't so overwhelming for kids as we got to the end.
Well, by the end of the year, we started doing the synthesis the first half and then the formative the second half of the block. But then for summatives, we would do a full day synthesis and then the summative the next day.
Because there's two separate ones. So this is a summative one. So this is specific to the summative. So we looked over the summative. We talked about like what are those key things they're going to need in order to do the summative, and what is the noise around that they don't need to focus on. Because there are lessons we know in there that were not on the summative, or they're not the key pieces that they need to know. So we focused on that, and then the ones that were for the formative were again based on the formative. What's on the formative that they need to have. The formative always went faster because there were only a few lessons before we had that formative, whereas the summative, you're going back through mostly through the whole chapter.
And I know each school, again, was doing something to this effect, whether it was like on an actual synthesis sheet, whether it was on anchor charts, whether they were having kids do just like a regular summative review. But this and all of those options are gonna tie really, really nicely into our EMLSS Tier 2 plan, where teachers have to figure out what are our like universal standards, essential standards. So this is really like highlighting what are our essential standards for this unit, what do students need to know, what do they have to be able to do in order to find success on the assessment. Okay, so a lot of us are already like one step ahead of the things that they're rolling out here. I saw a hand in the.
I just was a quick question. Did you do the review day 1 or practice day 1, practice day 2, and then the synthesis?
So we would always, you mean for the summative?
Yeah.
Yes, we would do a review and practice day like it's meant, like it has on here. But there was that day for reflection and synthesis, we just almost like flipped that before the end. And I think that's something as a team we probably need to talk about is like the reflection piece. So that would be an additional day, which would go back to his question, but that's something we'll have to work on.
Last thing, I just appreciated that every grade level at Butler was doing this, but it fit into whatever they needed. Like Meredith and Ginger, 8th grade, we know 8th grade doesn't have much time at all. So they were doing it as the unit went on, right? 6th and 7th grade were doing it more as that summative review day, and I think that worked out perfectly because they had the time for that. So just know what you need. It does work for all grade levels, which I appreciate it, because we could share that with everybody.
well, and I wanna go back to, kind of what Jeffrey was talking about. I loved how you talked about that, you know, if you're gonna launch something like this, we really have to think about focused instruction. We have to think about modeling, you know, our whole instructional framework that we're embracing as a district. But I think part of the reason why this was like a wow for me is as someone who is AVID trained and is an AVID coordinator, and we talk so much about how we have to get kids using the focused note process and having them not just take notes, but finding ways to go back into their notes and to actually applying them. This right here completely just exemplifies that process. So I love how you took that
and you made it something that was really, really usable and powerful for kids.
As we move into the next thing, I'm just gonna quick say like one little thing. I know that we have some people here that do intervention and are not doing decimals. Some people that are here that work with special ed and are not necessarily going to be supporting math. I am hoping that throughout your time today with us, you can pull threads of something that will apply to whatever content area it is that you support or whatever curriculum it is that you're trying to implement. I think that there's a lot that is applicable, and so your full engagement would be really appreciated. I see a lot of computers open that are probably on email or who knows what other things, and I understand that you're super busy, but be present in our time here today so that you can pull some things that will be really helpful for your students. Okay, go. Sounds
All right.
good.
Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that was really, really apparent, again, in all three buildings, but I thought in one particular building was the use of anchor charts. And again, I'm going to go back to some of the PLC discussions that we had back at Les Paul, and even thinking about yesterday, how the district launched our work. We watched that EMLSS meeting, and it talked about, again, the universal, or the essential skills that all kids are going to need, and that, you know, the rigor needs to be there, and that we can't water it down. Rather, we need to provide and build those scaffolds so that kids can continue to access grade level content standards. With having, again, a digital platform, what are some things that we can do that makes thinking visible and provides kids the opportunity to, and the resources that they can go to as we're learning all these different things. And I know many, many years ago when I was actually in this building, anchor charts was a really important instructional strategy that we really, really focused on. And so when I saw this, I'm like, yes, we need to continue to use this as a resource for our students. And so, Kelly, this was, again, in one of your buildings. These are some examples. Like I said, we saw it in all three buildings, but they were really, really beautiful. So I'm curious. Tell me a little bit about, you know, who's using anchor charts, how they're using it, the benefits that you're seeing from it.
So anchor charts really stood out for me at Horning. I think for those of you that teach at Horning, our big focus last year was like CLS, obviously, but also like making student learning visible. That was very pushed throughout the entire year. So I just took some pictures that come directly from Horning classrooms. Not all of them obviously could fit on here because I wanted you to be able to see what was actually on each of these. But a lot of teachers wanted to show like different strategies. We know Desmos is really based on students like exploring things and finding maybe one method that really works for them. So we didn't want to have just like one anchor chart about one thing. But you can see all the different strategies for various things. I have some stuff up here from 6th grade. There's like solving equations from an 8th grade classroom, but I know that would also apply to 7th grade on like a lesser level. But teachers were just like very, very clear about what these strategies were, what the processes were, and I thought it was a great thing for the kids to be able to look up and see. As we got further into the year, we were realizing like, okay, let's do some review, let's figure out, not synthesizing sheets necessarily, but I know a lot of you at Horning did various things for summative review days. Kids really looked at these. Like when I went into classrooms, they were looking at the posters around the room, the anchor charts around the room. And I also didn't have an example of it that fit on here, but like student created anchor charts as well. Noemi and Sierra, I know you guys had kids like create their own basically in their binders, that like their own little one pager with examples like all of this. So the kids had that to take with them wherever, and then it was the connection from unit to unit as well. Any Horning teachers want to add anything to anchor charts? What you use them for, how you created them? Question?
Yeah. One was, in our building, we were told they needed to be removed for assessment, so I just want to verify, like, did we do that? And then,
I think that's a building by building decision, I believe. Oh, for state assessment. they
No,
have to-
no, unit assessments, we had to take ours down.
I think that's a building decision.
So how is that universal instruction then, when if I go to one school, I get to use it, and when I go to a different school, I don't? In the same district?
So it sounds like a bigger conversation that our administrators would probably need to come together and discuss. There's something to be said. People will say, like, if the students know to look for the resources, that's one thing. But how do you build your anchor chart in a way that supports but does not provide the answer, you know? So sometimes it's in the anchor chart and how you do it that it's not everything, right? So there's a place for having supports up there, and then there's a place for also removing them for sure. So I'm not going to say everybody has to do it this way, but what I'm going to say is when you're creating your anchor chart, how are you creating it so that it triggers what you want students to remember? But it's also not so step by step that the student just needs to look up and do all of it without having to remember any of it.
Well, and it's just to clarify too, I mean, an anchor chart is a scaffold,
Right.
right?
Yep.
I mean, and scaffolds are designed to be removed, right? We want to provide the opportunity for kids to use these, you know, during learning, but ultimately, we want kids to become independent learners, and we want to be able to remove these things.
Right. And so if you're using your synthesis sheet, and students are allowed to like have that, for example, and other people are using an anchor chart and they're allowed to have that, then it's a similar scaffold that way, right? It's not the exact identical one, but it's still a scaffold. All right.
Any other questions or?
Yes.
Yeah, so Butler used their synthesis sheet on the assessment. I think kind of across 3 of the 4 middle schools, we kind of decided that like we weren't gonna use notes. And each building decided that, that was not like a Leslie designated thing. But everybody had decided we're not gonna use notes, we don't want kids to flip through.
Right,
So what can they
exactly.
use instead? Corning went the route of anchor charts, Butler went more the route of the synthesizing sheets. We'll get to Les Paul, but yeah, they could use those on the assessments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did have a question. Do language students add the Spanish words to it so that it was helpful?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a picture that didn't fit on here, but it did have
It'll come in
the vote.
in a couple slides ahead. There will be an example that is annotated for 2 languages, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
And again, I know the pictures are so small, but that top right one, top left one, does have both English and Spanish on there. So we saw a lot of that too, if applicable. Very cool.
And as you think about it too, think about if your kids are using their synthesis sheets, notes, anchor charts, how many of them don't then need to utilize them because they gain the independence from your instruction? So thinking about that way, we at Les Paul, kids were using notes for a while, and you know, it's a different, but then they never look at them on the assessment and do quite well because that learning stuck. It wasn't that you just taught it to them once, the learning stuck and they were able to take it and move forward. We talked about too, is it an anchor chart or is it a poster?
Right. Right. Yep.
Because if that anchor chart was up on September 9th and is still there on May 9th and nothing has changed with it, it just became a poster. Make it a useful tool, so.
And I love the discussion and I love the questions that came from the slide. And the reason I say that is because, again, Kelly, Leslie, we have the opportunities to go into different buildings, different classrooms and see what's happening. And we have the opportunity to have these discussions. And we have these discussions because ultimately we want what's best for kids. And we want to take all the amazing best practices that our teachers are using, and we want to be able to showcase them. So there's always areas for conversation, there's always room for growth. But as far as, you know, anchor charts and how we're using them, it was something that I really, it sparked discussion. So, thank you.
All right, Perfect. And our last one is engagement platform. So something that I really noticed at Les Paul was just like the different usage of the snapshot tool. I saw it more at Les Paul than I did at either of my buildings, but I think we all just had slightly different focuses this year as the year one. So Lynn, I was hoping you could tell us just a little bit more about like what you saw day to day in teachers' classrooms, how they were utilizing it, how that kept kids engaged because they're on their iPads all the time. It's a lot. So I would love to hear more about how teachers helped kids stay engaged with all of those things.
Yeah, so again, I would go back to PLCs and it starts there, and we would have, the discussions around, the math communication and that standard, and how do we get kids engaged in the math and talking and using the academic language and vocabulary that is important for kids to be able to grasp the concepts and the understandings. And, one of the things that we did year one is we did do some learning around the use of the snapshot tool. And teachers around our building were definitely using this, and they weren't just using it to showcase like how kids were answering things. They really used it to empower kids to talk about what they were seeing and how they could take something that was written and how they could make it stronger and clearer. And one of the things that I would sit back and I would watch and I would just be like, wow, this is magic, is how teachers would actually put these snapshots up. So they would have kids, answer questions. They would put these snapshots up, and they would have prompts or things that they would provide to their classes. And then they would sit back and they would wait in that awkward silence, and they would wait until kids were ready to talk. They didn't jump in. They didn't answer the questions for the kids. And it was really beautiful. So would any of my teachers like to talk a little bit about how they use the snapshot tool and kind of how they got kids using the academic language?
I think when you're choosing the things to showcase, it's important. Like sometimes I would choose, maybe they were all correct answers, but some were a little bit more in depth. Sometimes we chose incorrect answers that a lot of kids were using just to get them to talk about like, oh, I would do this or I would do that. I think it's just a really natural way to get to those misconceptions that kids are having. I loved it. I loved using it. It is, like you said, it's awkward at first to get them talking. It's a little bit awkward just because you're doing everything at the moment. You don't know what their answers are going to be and how you're going to choose them. So it took a while, but I feel like it really did. It was a way to naturally get kids engaged. Because their stuff was up there, now they can't sit back and hide.
I think adding on to that, I think it was like talking about the synthesis sheets. It was a natural break in the instruction, and it allowed kids to synthesize their learning. Like we had 10 minutes and then they would do this, and it was just like a nice little check-in for them as well to take a moment and really think about what they needed, what was happening in that lesson.
I'm curious too, as you started to use this instructional strategy with kids, you were masterful in prompting kids to get them to either add to or talk about, the different snapshots. I'm curious, what were some of the different prompts, or how did you get kids to, engaged in talking in math using the snapshot tool?
Well, we would use, I would say, choose something out there that you disagree with, choose something that you agree with. They could choose either. Most always would say, if your answer is up there, don't choose yours to speak on somebody else's. Again, the stronger, clear, how could you make this even stronger? Which of these, maybe these two here, are there any that you see similarities with, and how would you merge them? Just things like that. Looking for the differences, the similarities. There's a lot of opportunity there to do different things. And again, it's always kind of like in the moment because you don't know what they're going to put up there.
I would often ask them if they just saw this, whatever the snapshot is, and you
This is something I think that we wanted to work on, because we had really non-talkers in seventh grade last year. So my question on technology, not so good. And I know the screenshot feature, but then did you guys make like a, can you tell me more about like how you present it? Like how do you, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, is that a slide that you guys made that has that question or something, or?
No, so as
Okay.
you go through the platform and you can
Yeah.
see the responses.
Yeah.
You can literally like click on 4 of them and say display this.
Right, and then did you have like a bank of like ideas, like what you just said, or like you just came up with these?
You just come up.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of in the moment. That's what I mean, like it's kind of awkward at first.
Yeah.
but It just gets to be the way
Okay.
kids expect it and then
Okay.
they can't hide anymore.
Okay.
And then you just.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and just to build off of that, I know I saw in classrooms too where teachers were using some like the AVID strategies, where, you know, it wasn't necessarily going to be like a full class instruction, but it might be, okay, look at that now, go find your soulmate, right? And match up with them and, you know, blah, 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 here's your prompt. You know, so there were different ways to make it safe, right? To build that collaborative community where kids felt safe enough to talk and to share.
Kind of a side question to that, did anybody find an easier way to take some of the prompts and sentence frames that are in Decimos, like in the teacher side, and present them without having to like open 12 tabs and bounce like all over the place? Because like there's, with my dual language students, I try to always have the sentence frames up, but like going back and forth between the snapshot to the sentence frame back to like their answers so they can check, and like that was becoming kind of chaotic, and sometimes my smartboard would decide it wasn't so smart and die because it was like, you're doing too much to me, like.
So I would say that that's an excellent question. Remember how I sent that question sheet for our presenters for our decimal specific trainings? Throw it in there for the unit planning.
Okay.
And there's going to be time, I think, at the end for some questions and answers, so throw it in there, because if they don't know, maybe they'll make us away. All right? Okay, so we're going to do another little break because we've been sitting for a long time. So we're going to play something called Heads or Tails. And the first thing I realized is that I don't have a point. So I went and found, through technology, a flipper that says heads or tails. So we're going to be okay. For this one, we are not going out in the hallway, but you are going to stand. So if you want to play, you will stand. Don't stand yet. You don't know what the game's about. So just give me a second. When we say, okay, ready, like make your decision, you are going to show us heads or tails. And we learned this from the math conference, so blame them. Heads means your hands are up here. Tails means your hands are down here. Okay? So you're going heads or tails. And then we're going to flip it. And if you win, you stay standing. If you lose, you sit. Okay? Last person standing gets the other Starbucks gift. So, if you want to play, stand up. All right. We're just about ready to make a decision. We are going to keep your friends accountable back there because I can't see, so no cheating. If you lost, you really lost, okay? All right, we're going to make a decision, heads or tails. I'm seeing a lot of heads and I'm seeing a lot of tails. I am going to flip it. And it is heads. So if you have tails, sit down. If you have heads, stand up. And be ready to make your next decision. All right, make your decision, heads or tails.
Absolutely. Anything you can do for yourself.
All right, here we go. And it is tails. So if you still have tails, make your decision, heads or tails.
What are you doing, Holman?
We're still up.
You only had a 1 out of 3 chance to win.
All right, thank you, that would be great. All right, decision made, heads or tails? Here we go. Oh, I have it in my pocket. It's probably a 5, so I don't think you can stay. Okay, it's fine. The math budget doesn't allow for these things. All right, decision made. We have 2 and 2. 2 will win. It's tails.
Yeah, hogs.
So we have a showdown. Ready? All right. It's heads. So again, modeling a really quick activity that is not going to take a long time for your classroom. They're going to get up, they're going to get that good energy going. You don't have to have Starbucks gift cards. You can do a sticker, you can just do, internal motivation and clap for them, and that would be great. We started out with the things that are our favorite things. And there are so many, and I'm hoping that you do some really great takeaways. We're going to move on to year 2 priorities. What is going to be most important as we roll with year 2? And again, a recap of this is going to come. So, don't worry too much about taking notes just now. There are some things that I'm just going to say, keep doing what you're doing. Just don't stop. Keep going. You're doing great, and what we're doing is right. One is IXL. We're going to keep doing IXL the way that we have been doing. The assessment changed a little bit, but they're still going to do it the one time. It's about 45 minutes, and then they're going to do like every other week, like that tweak. It's going to look the same for them. Now, they are promising that it's not going to look like nobody's pinpointed. We'll see. They also say that there's a lot of them that have a little green dot, a lot of the skills that are now available in 50 languages. Maybe. We'll hope for the best, right? And they're not going to be all the skills, but if you have, we have some students that speak more than just English and Spanish, so there are some skills that will be in more than one language. So keep doing what you're doing with IXL. Keep doing what you are doing with pacing. We're going to teach all the Desmos units in the order that they come in. We're just going to go from Unit 1 through Unit 8. We put together the calendar again. However, we're probably not going to do it every year. Just know that you should be done with Unit 4 by semester, then you should be done with Unit 8 by the end of the school year, Unit 2 by quarter. Does that make sense? So we might not forever be able to do the very nitty-gritty of on this day, because it doesn't really matter. Pretty much everybody has more than enough room to get through the entire curriculum. 6th grade first semester, sorry, that's really tight. But everybody else has a good amount of room. Now, I know that some people will say, but we would like to teach Unit 8 or the Pythagorean theorem before state assessment. I am going to say this. If you have students that are proficient at every other standard already by the time you want to teach this, then that's a small group you're pulling, and you can teach them that, and you can assign them the skill in IXL, and that's fantastic. But we will not teach at the universal level in the order that it is not meant to be in. Because the reality is that at the universal level, students are not fully proficient at every other standard. And so if they get that question wrong, I'm okay with that. So, anonymize. That was a conversation that we had about a year ago. Please anonymize 100% of the time. Even if you don't show the dashboard to the kids, please anonymize. I'm getting a dashboard now about every quarter that shows me the percentage of the time that students are anonymized. And it is not 100%, it's actually fairly low. And one of the reasons is because people don't always show the dashboard. And you think, well, then I don't need to. But the moment that students submit an answer and 3 go to them that other kids said, if that's not anonymized, then they're getting to see who said what. If a student says, oh, I'm Catherine Johnson today, that's different, right? But keep your anonymized on. It's school board policy. Right, Jeffrey? Okay, so let's keep it on. We're going to continue to use our common assessments from Desmos. We're going to go straight to Desmos for them. We're going to use them the way that they are written. However, please accommodate for IEPs and ILPs I know that there's people who are doing amazing things with that and scaffolding and supporting, but for everybody else, we're using the common assessments from Desmos. Now, those are the keep doing what you're doing. We're gonna do 3 steps this year. Yes, Tim?
Ms. Walls, when you say anonymizer, are we even talking about when we're doing Desmos?
Yes.
If we want to pull up kids' work, you know?
Yes.
just-
You have to have it on anonymous.
Are we good?
Yes, so there's some anonymity there, so students feel safe to have conversations about who got what. Yes.
So, as we're going through that with the anonymized, like, if it's anonymized, I can't see who's lagging behind and say, oh,
So
make sure
you
finish
can
this.
hover over to the list and the name will pop up for you. So just hover over and the name will pop up so that you can see it as a teacher,
You just
okay?
can't do that if it's up on the board. You have to do it on a separate device.
Right, right.
If
So-
you've got both devices open, you're fine. Put one on the screen, one not.
3 next steps that we're going to take. The first one is called Platform First, and I'll tell you where this one is coming from. As we have gone through the year, people have said, oh, but I spend all of my time doing the workbook first, then we get to the platform. So the keywords are platform first. Oh, but I have this great video that teaches kids how to do this skill and has a great song that the kids remember and it's really great. Great, fantastic. Use it at the end, platform first. Maybe at the end of a unit, maybe right before an assessment. Oh, but I had this fantastic project that we did right before Christmas that got the kids really excited. Great, do it. But platform first. So platform first will be the keywords this year, but not all the slides. What? Here's the thing, Desmos was not designed for every kid to do every slide. And Desmos was not designed for the teacher to review every slide. You will never have time. So platform first, but not all the slides. There are specific slides that are very important. In fact, they are key discussion slides. And if you go through your planning, you will see what those are. Those are the ones you need to focus your discussions on. You do not need to do every single one. If a kiddo is still working on something and you need to pace them to the next key discussion stream, then you use your pace to me and you get right there. So yes, platform first, but I didn't say all of that, what comes in the platform, right? So use that to differentiate. Some students are gonna be able to do all the slides. Some students will do a few of the slides. So that's an important thing. Notes, whatever else comes after. A word about notes, we got workbooks for this new year. This is the last year that these workbooks are gonna be relevant. The workbooks are going to change. I don't know yet if we're gonna get to order them or not. I have no idea. You have workbooks. Admin, I'm going to call on you. Do we want people printing the same thing that is on the workbook? No. So, use the workbook. You don't have to use all the workbook. You can select a page and say, we're going to use this one item from the workbook today. There are things that you print for games and things like that, but you should not be printing the entire packet of the unit for the workbooks. Yes?
I will say, I won't speak for Robert, but I have had the conversations with the teachers though as well, is if we can have a discussion about an intentional use for something that you're printing, totally open to having that conversation.
Yes.
Otherwise, in general.
Yes, I agree with you, that's fair. So it's something that has an intentionality, but printing the entire like PDF. However, my friends in 6-7 and 7-8, they do have to print the entire thing. We don't have workbooks for them, so they get a pass on that. So notes, yes, keep using that, but it comes after the platform. The second thing that is new but not new is the common assessments. They have been preloaded into your Infinite Campus already. So they're already in there. Units 1 through 4 are in your first semester. Units 5 through 8 are in your second semester, so that you can just enter them in there. That's already done for you. Yes?
When you say that, you mean like the grades, we just have to go in and plug in the grades, not the actual.
Yes. So the summative assessments have been preloaded. That was my summer work. I did it for high school too. This is great. I learned something new. And so the reason why we did that is because now if we want the data, if we say, you know what, Unit 6 for 7th grade is crucial. We're going to pull the data for the whole district and say, how did the kids do? Now, everyone has the same code, so we can pull it without everybody having to go extra and enter it into database or do something like that. So it was meant to facilitate a data discussion, and so I think it's gonna be a really good move.
Another question.
Yes.
Are the rubrics, is a blank rubric attached to each of those, or is that something we can add?
You can add that. I did not attach rubrics. I just entered the assessments. All right? So what are we gonna use this data for? Well, you're gonna use it for readiness, and that's something that's gonna come in the unit level planning. They're gonna talk about how to use that readiness check. You can use your data with the cool down and the quizzes. Now, all of that is not in Infinite Campus, it's just the summatives. But we're gonna be using some of our data for planning more, and I know that your PLCs are fantastic, and Kelly and Lynn are amazing. And it's just gonna be different this year because now we're not as much about implementing first year, but we can really start looking at that data. So I can't wait to see what it is that we do. So step 1, next step is platform first. Step 2 is common assessments. Step 3 is supporting language. So we continue to have a lot of language learners in our district, and we want to make sure that every person here knows how to support that language. And we're going to talk about it in 3 different ways. The first one is accessibility on the platform. The platform can look like Spanish and probably a lot of other languages. You're going to go to the 3 dots, translate, and choose Spanish. Every student should have access to that accommodation if they need it. That will be the first thing that, okay, now this is in Spanish for me. That's basically what you're doing, and that's what it says right there, so I don't need to read it. The second way is language partners. But I want to talk about that because I think we have a misunderstanding about language partners because I'm hearing my student refuses to be a language partner. Students don't want to be language partners. Okay, so let's talk about language partners in a way that it won't be an extra burden. If I would have asked Chris, because I know she speaks Spanish, to talk to Colleen and be her language partner during this presentation, it would have been a burden on her that would have been unfair. She would not be getting anything herself. She would just be constantly trying to hear what I'm saying and translate it as fast as she can. That is an undue burden on anybody. So, it's a partnership that can process in a different language. They should speak to each other just as much as any other partner, but not more. So the only time that the language partner is speaking in the other language is when the teacher says, talk to your partner about A, B, and C. Everybody's doing the talking. They're not isolated in trying to have this burden of listening, translating, and repeating. So if they're not talking any more than anybody else, they should not feel like this is a burden that they can't handle. So what is the key? The key is to let students do talking and let students do processing. And if the students are turning in their answers and they're having a discussion, it's okay if their answer is in Spanish. So don't put on language partners more than what they should be doing. They are not simultaneous translators. That is a job. It's a well-paid job. It's a very difficult job to do. It's not for our middle school students to do. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? Okay. So if you want to build more opportunities for partners to speak to each other, try an avid strategy called 10-2-2 processing. I'm not doing it today. It means you talk for 10 minutes, and then you process on your own for 2 minutes, and then you process with a partner for 2 minutes. Or you process with your partner first, and then you process by yourself for 2 minutes. It's called 10-2-2. It's an avid strategy. It might add more opportunities for students to speak to one another. If your students who speak another language are not having enough opportunities to process, it's probably going to feel like you're not reaching them, and you're going to get frustrated. So hopefully this will help. The other way to support language is through environmental print. And so there is a way there that looks like a side-by-side, where you have your words in English and you have your words in Spanish. Students can add to it. It doesn't have to be you. You'll say, oh, I don't speak Spanish. That's okay, the students do. Use a glossary all in In our curriculum maps, you will find the glossary in Spanish, and it has the articles added to it, which is something that we needed, that Desmos didn't provide us yet, but we have that done now. And so you can build it throughout the unit. You don't have to wait until the last day to do it. Build it as you go. Now, I see, Noemi, I see that you guys are like nodding. Do you want to speak to it?
I mean, we just had 2 non-English speakers, brand new, they didn't know a word of English, and it's like, even though they had access, they were able to access the curriculum and change their language in Desmos, which is really great. There were just some words that Desmos used in the slide presentation, I was like, okay, I don't know if they're gonna know this, so we made sure that they were with us as well, and then there's a follow, so we did some translating throughout the units as well.
So you can do it side by side. I know that some people said, well, how do you make it not so cluttered, right? And there's gonna be something of that. It's not gonna be perfect. Students can even add little strips or just a post-it on it, just the word. If you have something that looks more involved, they can label some of the pieces. It's not perfect. It doesn't have to look Insta-worthy. It just needs to be practical to the students. So the 3 steps are platform first, using the common assessments, and supporting language in 3 different ways. Those are the next steps. Otherwise, I think that we're doing great. We can just keep doing what we're doing. There's nothing really that we're changing as we go into year 2. Whew, that's a lot. Let's talk about what's coming up today. And then after that, I think we're going to be done a little bit earlier. At 9:45, if you are new to Desmos and an interventionist, you're going to go to room 52 for lesson level planning. And I think that is just across the hall in Kelsey's room. Kelly will be with you supporting. If you are already someone who did Desmos before, then you're going to room 45 for unit level planning. Room 45, you have to go all the way around, or you can cross through this room and then cross to the next room, and that's your fastest way to get there. These sessions are going to be led by Desmos people. You're going to have your device with you, and you're going to follow along. You know that they like to use the Desmos Slidex for that. And we're going to be projecting. There will be a time for questions and answers at the end. Then at 11:15, you have lunch. After lunch, if you teach science, you're following the science path. If you are an interventionist, you are going to North with me for intervention training. If you are not teaching science, and not an interventionist, and not special ed, because I'm sure you have stuff to do that is not with that, then you have planning time with your grade alikes. So grades 6 and 6-7 are going to be in room 52, which is again just outside. 7 and 7-8 are going to be in room 45, which is the one that is just across from this one. And then room 50 will be for teachers teaching 8th grade and integrated math. Then, on the 27th, from 10:30 to 11:30, there is a session back in this room, also led by Desmos, called Increasing Engagement with Instructional Routines. That will be here. Kelly and Lynn will be here with you. I will be doing high school equivalent of this. And then in the afternoon, you have common planning time again in the same rooms. If you are new and you don't know anything about IXL, you will have an opportunity to go on the 27th from 12:30 to 2 to North, where there will be an intro to IXL that is being done for eAchieve, and you get to jump in if we want to. So that is what's going on. I think everybody kind of has an idea. You've seen the spreadsheet, you've seen lists, but the rooms are different because they're waxing next door, and that was new. So Kelsey is lending us her room. We're using another room next to it, and I think that's about all I have for now. There will be an email with recap and link coming. Do you have any questions or final concerns before we take a little break?